Lassus System, Lassus Gate, early 2670, Chief General Torlak. Are we cleared for detonation? Torlak questioned, facing one of his communications specialists. We are clear, Chief General, but are you certain? The crewman asked, pleading with his eyes the act that they were about to commit. We would be leaving all residents to fend for themselves. Torlak nodded. I know, issuing solemn affirmation. I don't know what their technology is for them to exit at any point in space, but we can't let them will fully control the IS gate of Lassus. We must stall them to better prepare Sella's defense. It's the best we can do. Before them was a large ring, and on the sides connected to it were the necessary auxiliary structures to activate the gate. Unlike their other interstellar highways that operated with a much smaller intersystem hyperlane, the gate to the inner colonies was massive. Due to the size of the anomaly, no normal ship could willfully traverse to the inner systems, hence why a massive construct was erected to support the opening of said gate. It was also due to the power demand that only military and scheduled civilian transit were allowed access across the gate and not individual ships. This would also apply to ships sanctioned by the Chief General of the Sellian Navy. All of Sellian FTL travel relied on these intersystem gates. By utilizing a specialized gate drive aboard their ships, one can open a tear in space to allow for one to traverse to another system that the gate connects to. This mode of travel is common for the Sellians as well as for the Galactic Union. It was also how they could hold systems, by controlling the entry and exit point of any system and placing defenses on the border systems. The Lassus Gate was one such defense, and destroying it would normally be akin to stopping the Union in its tracks. These types of systems were called a choke system. This thinking was why Torlak felt it necessary to destroy the only way into the next system, Borlo. Its population is dense with a sizable defense fleet, and Torlak felt it necessary to alert them of the likely attack within the next few days. Set the timer for when the last ship enters the gate. I need to know if it will detonate, Torlak ordered. It will, Chief General. We've coordinated with the last of the gate security. They will ensure that it gets destroyed, replied the solemn communications officer. Torlak thought back to their latest conflict. While it went well initially, he couldn't shake the feeling he had during the skirmish. Sellian ships within the ranks of the Terrans. Pull up a view of our ambush with the Terrans, ordered Torlak, the thought now beginning to meld its way into his forethought. I need to verify something. Yes, Chief General, replied an officer who manned a station on the large holoprojector in the center of their large bridge. The projected image showed the iconic Terran fleet with their rectangular ships filled to the brim with devastating weapons and armor. But that wasn't what Torlak was drawn toward. Within the ranks of the Terran fleet were smaller, round-looking ships. The top portion was like a crustacean's carapace, armored and segmented while also lined with weapons along the spine of the ship, with the underbelly exposed with more offensive compartments. They rivaled in size to the medium-sized frigates of their enemy, but lacked proper offense and defense of the Terrans. Traitors all, Torlak whispered to himself. Markings along the side of the larger cruiser were recognized in Sellian Common, as did the rest of the crew. The Sword of Sella, a cruiser that was at least twice the size of the Terran's heavy frigate, but it rested in the center of their formation beside a Terran heavy frigate by the name of Fury of Hell. At least that's what they translated. Are we sure they weren't coerced? One crewman asked. What if the enemy has learned to pilot them? Asked another. Their questions were reasonable and sound, according to Torlak. Why indeed? Torlak ordered an inquiry on the ship and others attached to the enemy formation. They found that the commander was prominent in the outer reaches of Sellian space. Chief Commander Yorla. Torlak racked his brain, searching for the name within his mind, but came to a null conclusion. I do not recognize her. Where does she hail? And does she have a history of treason? No, a crewman shook his head. Nothing of the sort. In fact, it's more of the opposite. He revealed a dossier on Yorla that spoke true of her history. She was solely responsible for curbing outer colony rebellions several years ago from Lassus to Verbus, in that arm of space. She had been so far removed from home that she later decided that the outer colonies would be her home station. Looking further back into her records, They noticed that her time in the inner colonies lasted for only the beginning of her naval career. Since then, she's been roaming in between Lassus and Verbus. It's a wonder she never experienced the Terrans before us, Torlak said. It appears she was reassigned to deal with some slavers beyond the Borlo asteroid belt when your fleet was mobilized, stated a crewman. The Toscan? Yes, Chief General. They were trying to enslave the smaller mining facilities. However, their attacks proved futile. Torlak acknowledged Yorla's work to serve the people of Sela, but still wondered what could have caused her to turn towards the enemy. From the recordings, they never fired a shot at their brethren. Instead, they acted as a point defense system, not directly harming them, but aiding in their subsequent destruction. Next time we face them, Yorla and her fleet will face judgment for aiding the enemy. Let it be known, Chief Commander Yorla of the Trill Fleet is a traitor. She and her fleet shall be known as the Traitors of Yorla. The air on the bridge grew heavy, but they did their work and sent word to the inner fleets of the traitor known as Yorla. When the last ship entered the gate, a timer was set for 5 minutes when a signal from navigation pinged and then was silent. A call from the navigator reported to Torlak. All clear signal from the Lassus gate has ceased. Destruction is likely. Normally, when a ship travels through space, they have several factors to take into account when navigating. For the Selians, they only received appropriate waypoints of any system as long as they are present within said system. Communications are the same as well, but depending on the ship, communication could also be sent from system to system if the transmission was sent via the central system comm relay. Torlak knew little of how they worked, but knew that they were essential to send word all across Selian space. Good. He was sullen in his response, but knew it was something that had to be done, even though he had second thoughts on whether it would appropriately stall the enemy. Prepare a course for Celia, he ordered. His fleet was already in a gate tunnel leading to Borlo, and said so to reinforce order among his troops. What news do you bring, Torlak? Said Kalim, head chief of the War Council. What do you make of their current forces? Can we best them? A series of questions were shot forth in succession, catching Torlak off guard, but he answered them in earnest. I suspect we will have quite the fight on our hands, head chief. Their force is sizable, more than when I began my campaign against the Terrans, Torlak commented, taking a moment to gauge the council members' reactions, but found them to be free of such worry. We've received your report, sounded Reka, the red-robed military advisor. Numerically, we have the advantage, and in turn, we outgun them, he said confidently. Even now, we have many of our manufacturing stations turning out ships faster than we can count. The loss of the Lassus system and beyond has hardly hurt our production. Breka, the blue-robed logistics advisor, added, Besides, Polis has managed to spin the tale of the Terran menace encroaching on our systems to favor us. Polis nodded, not adding a word as he was eyes deep in his personal data pad, perhaps as he devised another set of speeches for the ongoing conflict. We have many still who come rushing to enlist in the defense of our home. It's only a shame you could not beat them back. Torlak felt a sting as the words from the head chief were carried from where he sat to where Torlak stood. In the end, he too felt the shame of not being able to complete his campaign against the humans. He thought to himself, the encounter of where it all started. He recalled that their first strike went smoothly, and he managed to enslave many souls to bargain for the continued existence of his people. They were not his people to worry about, as he knew that this was a natural byproduct of war, at least where the Union was concerned. He also knew that his people had fought a war abolishing such a trade within their territory. It was only natural that Torlak found it ironic. It was also why he was careful to instruct that any and all slave ships passing through would take the military-exclusive routes and to keep out of civilian eyes. Upon hearing, however, that those he employed were also partaking in the slavery of Selians, a fury grew within him. Perhaps I should rescind my contract with the Toscans and order their execution upon entering our territory again, he thought to himself before returning his attention to the 5 councilmen. How do you wish for us to proceed? Surely they will make for a final push on our cradle, Torlak said, trying to regain a foothold of relevance as their appointed chief general. We shall strengthen both the land and air, Callum stated, for if they break through, and I pray they do not, then we shall fight them at home. Therefore, I am proud to say that we may have a little surprise for our guests, should they be in orbit. Callum ended, now directing attention to Reka, the military advisor. Ahem, he started. While you were gone, we began a project to bolster our planetary defenses. He pressed a button upon his desk, and the likeness of their planet came to life in a projected fashion. The lights of major and minor city centers were appropriately marked, and the world was set up in sections with several green dots in each, most notably around said city centers. With another press of a button, the view changed from the planet to the cause of conversation. It was a large weapon with a singular barrel pointed towards the sky and sat on 4 reinforced support struts. There was a Celian inputted for scale beside the weapon, showing how massive it was, with the Celian measuring smaller than his thumb and the weapon being almost 1,000 times larger. How were you able to create so many of these beasts? Torlak voiced, alluding to the obvious logistical and economic discrepancy it would cost to manufacture them. Breka, the War Council's head of economy and logistics, interjected, As you know, we are now in full war economy mindset, and with the help of Polis's speeches, we have been able to convince the vast majority of what's at stake. I'm sure you're aware, he finished with an obvious gaze. These weapons will be essential in the defense of the planet, Reka continued. We will have a contingent of guards for its security while they operate. I will provide for you the details later. Torlak nodded, then turned to Polis, who was now relieved of his use of his pad that he set down with an audible clang. Family, the cradle, anything and everything historically of value is now at risk, Polis began to speak. Those who had seen the videos of the Terran lies of helping our own have been revealed to be what they truly are, lies. Why would the Terrans bring compassion to their enemy who have done nothing of the sort? His monologue, clearly directed towards the initial decision to enslave them, rang clear in Torlak's mind, and he stammered out an answer but was cut off. They don't! Remember this! Any and all footage regarding Terran hospitality is nothing but lies and deceit. I only reveal it as it is, an enemy bent on destroying us for trying to claim what is rightfully ours, beyond the system of Anmira and Demira. He garnered respected applause from the nearby councilmen as well as from the guards scattered about the room. Torlak conceded any doubt he may have had about his actions, now fully resettled on the defense of his people's home world. Do not worry. I only wish for the safety of all who reside in Sela and beyond. Callum now stood, facing the prostrating Torlak. I do hope this audience has rekindled your reason for why we fight, Torlak. He nodded in response to the head chief's words and was released from the chambers. Go now, Chief General. Our enemy is soon to be upon us. Do not disappoint us. Torlak continued beyond the doors to the chambers and found himself just outside the main doors that led into a courtyard. Within the walls were a series of modifications of razor-like wire on the top and sanded containers that added to the thickness of the alloy walls. The presence of Celian special forces were also seen adding to the defenses. Barricades were placed facing towards the central gate, and flanking the main pathway were a set of automated turrets. Torlak looked behind him as he made his way toward the entrance and noticed the same types of additions to the roof of the War Council. However, instead of the smaller anti-personnel turrets, the ones on top of the roof were larger. Designed for anti-ship and anti-vehicle turrets, the War Council was becoming the most fortified building he had ever seen, putting to shame their heavily fortified asteroid defense posts. With a light flicker of the sky, he noticed a faint shimmer extending towards the edges of the building's walls. It was a projectile countermeasure designed to deflect or stop incoming rounds and missiles. He had read of this technology before when it was proposed during a research and development summit several years ago. It was devised to protect against most fighter ships and artillery, and has seen extensive testing during those times. It worked fine when against a variety of munitions, but the generator had a weakness known to all who utilized it. A portion of the shield would lower to retaliate with defensive munitions of their own. It was a known problem, and since then, a doctrine of when to return fire was conjured. As he made his way toward the entrance, he was greeted by the many Sellian special forces, donned in their full helmet and body armor of blue-green, with subtle glacial blue markings. Their glass visors reflected a deep amber as they looked at Torlak with a wave and Sellian salute. After he exited the gate, and it closed with a thud and buzz, he looked around at the area before him. He stood on a large sidewalk where access was blacked off to the average pedestrian. The traffic was sparse, as was with the overall pedestrian traffic on the opposite side of the sidewalk. He took a left and headed straight from the rail that would take him home. He had earned some time off and gave the same to the fleet he had just commanded. His heart went out to the lost souls beyond Lassus, but reinforced the thought that it was for the better, saw the security of Sella and all who live within the system. As he furthered his way toward the central rail station, he noted the increase in military influence extended far beyond the immediate area of the building walls. He hadn't noticed them when he came in via shuttle, even as a passenger. This recent development enforced the reality that they were preparing for war. The further he ventured, he was met with the same solemn atmosphere. The streets were light with all manner of traffic, and he was glad to see that the rail resumed operation. It was entirely automated, so there was no need to shut them down just yet. He boarded the rail car and waited for it to carry him home. The skies grew gloomy with gray clouds casting a dark shadow over the city. A strong breeze also began to pick up, much heavier in force compared to when he left the council walls. What was once a vibrant green horizon of rolling hills and flowing grass was now dulled. Torlak was the only soul aboard the rail car several minutes into the trip. The mechanized hum of electromagnetic rails filled the otherwise silent cart. He dared not think what might happen should the enemy break through to their home. He pulled a personal data pad from a pocket and analyzed established defenses around the system. There were several detachments of ships in defense over key installations scattered about the Sella system. Research facilities, training stations, etc. All were vital for their unit production and technology. As the rail slowed to a stop, Torlak exited the rail car and was met with silence. Only the sounds of a cold, continuous breeze rustling the leaves and bushes were audible. Add to the fact of the colorless environment, Torlak was now met with a bleak and chilling rail platform. He walked towards the exit of the station and found more of the same scene, however, as he walked. Trash littered the walkways and occasionally was carried by the wind once he stepped out into the main road of his home. He paused at an intersection and noticed a multitude of personal belongings littered along the sides of the pavement. What happened here? He thought to himself, saying so audible to the world but with no soul to listen. He quickened his pace to his home, fearing the worst, running the faces of his wife and children. "Please be safe," he muttered. When he arrived, he noticed the door closed and locked, unlike many of the homes he had passed. He entered the home's unique code and slowly pushed it open with a slow and reverberating creak. His wife was eccentric and favored the ancient style of door operation, as his doors swiveled into the home rather than slide into the house itself. He did, however, appreciate the heavy construction of the door, as it was made of a high-quality wood from a forest to the north, renowned for its steady supply of dense and beautiful wood. With the door open, Torlak was now met with an empty house, the dust now unsettled as it glistened in what little light filtered through the door and windows. He looked down to where they normally placed their shoes and found each pair missing, Torlin, Alesa, and Aleska's. From their several pairs, he noticed that they only wore a single pair. Moving past the entry, he moved to the rest of the home. How much of a hurry were they in? The kitchen had several dishes in the sink, and the amount was less than what his family normally consumed, even with only the 3. The living area was in the same state it normally is, organized, but often with toys from his children littered about. He moved up to his children's rooms and noticed that their clothes had been run through, leaving a mess around the drawers.
Their respective luggage was gone, but he moved on towards his room and found the same scene as with his children. Clothes littered about, and a missing luggage bag, however. This time he found a note place in plain view on their room's mirror. Torlak plucked it from the mirrored surface and read it. He was at a loss.
She left no idea where they had gone, only that they were taken by guards to an undisclosed location. Even with a note, it did little to alleviate his worry, and thus began to call up the chain with regard to civilian relocation. "I can try and redirect you, but you must understand we're swamped with the whole process, Chief General," spoke one of the administrative operators. "We're still trying to count our totals. I will get back to you should we come up with anything." Torlak hung up and cursed. "If only I could have seen them off myself," he muttered. His latest mission caused an untold amount of stress, whose sole mission was to gauge the enemy forces before a final stand, and took heavy losses. Before he could settle in his home, he received a call, this time from a chief commander manning the orbital station defenses. "Chief Commander Orlan, for what reason do you call?" The commander was showing his age, his skin now pale in comparison to his once lively pastel blue from his younger days. "It's time for you to man your station, Chief General. I've already sent a shuttle to your location, and it will take you to your ship." Torlak sighed. "Very well. When can I expect it?" "In 20 minutes. Torlak slowly raised himself from his living room couch, reminiscing on the sudden change in atmosphere of his town. He then made his way beyond his home, looking back as he stood on the edge of the pavement leading up to the door. It loomed silently of abandonment. No lights, no laughter, no sign of life. He turned towards the main road, not looking back, as he made his way to the town's central shuttle landing platforms. There was room for 2 shuttles, as the residents didn't utilize the shuttles, instead opting for the rail system that led into Artre, the capital of Celia. Time passed quickly as Torlak sat on a nearby bench as he awaited the shuttle and was met by several armed guards. They wore a menacing, full-faced helmet with an amber visor that looked like a V, with similarly colored brown armor. It covered the entirety of their torso, with slim-fitted shoulder plates, and thigh carapace that focused forward defense and was connected by 2 straps from the rear portion of the leg. The weapons they sported were standard-issue kinetics. They looked like a slim rectangle with the ammunition loaded in the rear and a sleek sidearm holstered on their waist. They were the Type 12 repeater and the Type 11 service, respectively. Their colors were black and brown, matching their armor, and indicated who they originally belonged to, since the normal infantry versions were gray and black. Torlak boarded the shuttle and looked out the open side of the craft to his home as it shrank, and the door closed before they entered full sped toward orbit. After the shuttle landed in a free hangar bay, Torlak made his way to the familiar bridge. Creo and the rest of his crew were present, and they all turned when Torlak made his entrance. "Welcome back, Chief General." Creo was the first to greet him. "Likewise. Any word from the blockade?" Torlak replied, now directing the question to the comms officer. "Currently resupplying attack craft and placing them on standby. All ships have created a net around the planet and are actively scanning for enemy ships. Nothing yet." Torlak nodded to the report and claimed his seat. He analyzed the large hologram of the planet with numerous ships in key locations, presumably military installations and civilian shelters. Torlak tried once again to contact those responsible for sheltering the populace, but was met with nothing. "Please, be safe," he muttered, now facing to the void from the central viewport, the endless expanse now staring at him, awaiting the enemy.
Nearing slipspace exit, conducting preliminary scans. Large enemy contingent detected, preparing shields, notifying advanced strike force. Message paused, awaiting exit of slipspace, engaging Owl protocol drones. Arming weapons, adding firing solutions. Exiting jump 5, 3, 2, 1.